Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really plunging into a reality that I think many deeply misunderstand as a truly critical topic, often veiled by this illusion of profound opportunity. We're talking about the true nature, the hidden dimensions of pursuing education abroad, what countless individuals perceive as, a golden ticket to success, a guaranteed pathway to prestige and a brighter future, can, in stark reality, be a journey fraught with the most profound, often devastating, and certainly unforeseen perils. This isn't just about academic challenges, about tough exams, or unfamiliar subjects. No, it's about something far deeper, something that touches the very core of who you are.
Indeed. What you've just said truly captures the immense gravity of this situation. The reality we have observed for many young Muslims seeking education abroad is disturbingly, fundamentally, far from the idealized image so often painted by society, by well-meaning families, or even by the dreams in their own minds. This isn't merely about acquiring a degree or a credential. It's about navigating an environment so profoundly challenging, so you could say systematically designed, that it can and often does lead to deep spiritual and moral compromise, leaving indelible marks on one's soul. Our deep dive today will challenge those commonly held beliefs about foreign education, aiming to strip away the veneer and expose the stark truths that are, maybe by design, often concealed. These are realities few dare to speak about openly, but which have been observed firsthand by countless individuals who have gone through these very experiences.
Okay, let's unpack this then. There's an incredibly powerful allure, isn't there? It draws so many young people and their families towards educational pursuits in Western and other foreign lands. On the surface, the perceived benefits are incredibly compelling. You hear stories, you see images, and you're told about the ease of university admission, which makes the entire path seem less daunting, maybe less competitive than at home. Then there's the pervasive promise of lower living costs. We're talking about everything from accommodation and food to clothing and transport, making it seem significantly more accessible financially for families. And of course, there's the undeniable draw of access to specialized academic fields, unique programs, and cutting-edge research opportunities not readily available or even existent in their home countries. From this perspective, it truly sounds like an undeniably fantastic package deal, a dream opportunity that promises progress and advancement.
What's truly fascinating here, yet profoundly tragic, is precisely how deceptive those perceived advantages often are. While those benefits, the tangible ease of admission, the seemingly lower costs, the access to specific, highly desirable fields might appear alluring, might even feel real in the initial stages, they frequently serve as nothing more than a thin, deceptive veneer. Beneath that superficial surface lies an infinitely greater, often irreparable cost. From countless observations, we have witnessed a profound and often irreversible loss of religious identity, a fracturing of moral integrity that could shatter lives, and a severe, lasting impact on psychological well-being. It is an undeniable truth that pursuing a degree in such environments frequently comes at the expense of one's very essence, one's core being, resulting in what many who have lived through it describe as a complete loss of everything that truly matters in life. The initial savings, the ease of entry, the specialized degree, these become, almost insignificant when weighed against the profound spiritual and moral devastation.
That's a stark, almost chilling warning. If we connect this to the bigger picture, once a student steps into these foreign environments, what are the most immediate and, I suppose, dangerous impacts on their spiritual and moral lives? Where does this erosion begin, and how quickly does it accelerate from those initial, seemingly small compromises?
It begins insidiously, almost imperceptibly, often with seemingly minor compromises that then accelerate at an alarming and devastating rate. Consider, for instance, the insidious erosion of dietary and religious practices. Students often begin by rationalizing the consumption of non-halal meat. That is, meat not slaughtered according to Islamic law, particularly animals that have been stunned before slaughter. They might cite difficulties in finding truly halal options, perhaps claiming they are scarce, or they might point to the prohibitive high costs associated with them. But what's truly disturbing, and a clear sign of this initial slide, is the trend of actively seeking false rulings, or, convenient interpretations. These are obtained by either misrepresenting their true circumstances to religious scholars, or by actively seeking out fringe opinions that go against the consensus of legitimate Islamic jurisprudence. They are, in essence, trying to find a convenient loophole rather than an honest answer for their challenging situation. This is particularly crucial because, in reality, the vast majority of slaughterers in these Western regions are not people of the book, referring specifically to Jews and Christians whose slaughtered meat might otherwise be considered permissible under very specific Islamic conditions. This lack of proper Islamic slaughter means the meat is fundamentally questionable, even by the most lenient interpretations. This initial compromise, even if it appears small, opens a big door to further moral decline. We've observed that this path frequently leads to the consumption of pork, which is unequivocally forbidden, and tragically, widespread alcohol abuse, often escalating into full-blown crippling addiction. Moreover, many young Muslims, initially observant, gradually cease observing core Islamic duties. Daily prayers are abandoned, sometimes one by one, and fasting during Ramadan is neglected. Initially, they might cite practical excuses like excessively long daylight hours during summer or intensely hot weather, but this quickly progresses to open disregard, profound neglect, and even mockery of these fundamental acts of worship. This is not just a lapse, it's a systemic unraveling of their religious commitments.
That describes a truly heavy and alarming progression. Beyond the dietary and religious practices, how does the pervasive spread of immorality manifest itself in these environments? What kind of psychological and spiritual toll does that take on these young people?
What's truly alarming is the sheer, overwhelming level of promiscuity. Zina, illicit sexual relations, or fornication becomes commonplace, shockingly so, and is often easily accessible from day one of arrival. It's not a rare occurrence, it's unfortunately part of the fabric of daily life there. There's a clear and incredibly rapid, slippery slope where individuals quickly fall into illicit relationships, sometimes involving multiple partners, participation in group activities, or even, most tragically, succumbing to prostitution. The entire environment normalizes these behaviors. You witness overt, unrestrained public displays of affection, explicit sexual acts, and even sodomy occurring openly in public spaces like university campuses, on bustling streets, and within dormitory common areas. It becomes virtually impossible, an utterly futile attempt to lower one's gaze, to avert one's eyes.
It's just constant.
Constant. Due to the unavoidable and pervasive exposure to explicit and immodest scenes. The sheer volume and relentless nature of such displays overwhelm any individual's attempts to maintain modesty or inner purity, leading to a profound internal struggle that, frankly, most are ill-equipped to handle. The constant visual and auditory bombardment fundamentally reshapes their perceptions of normalcy and morality.
So it's not just about individuals making personal choices. It's an unavoidable, inescapable barrage of fitna, a torrent of temptation and tribulation, as you put it. What about the deeper impact on their core beliefs and values? Is the academic environment itself, the very place they're ostensibly there to learn, a factor in this profound erosion of faith?
Absolutely. The assault on core beliefs and values is a significant and often overlooked peril, insidious in its approach. Atheistic and secular ideologies are not just present, they're explicitly woven into university curricula. They're often presented not as theories or perspectives, but as sacred truths, fundamentally immune to criticism or alternative viewpoints. Evolution theory is a prime example. It's taught not as a scientific theory subject to ongoing debate, but as an unassailable, universally accepted truth. Furthermore, certain Christian denominations are incredibly active in proselytization. They specifically target Muslim girls, particularly those wearing the hijab, as they are easily identifiable and, regrettably, often seen as vulnerable. Their methods are insidious, knocking on dormitory doors, initiating seemingly innocent conversations, and then posing a torrent of doubts to systematically undermine students' faith. Their primary objective isn't necessarily conversion to Christianity, rather it is unequivocally to remove them from Islam, regardless of whether they adopt another faith or simply become atheists.
Just get them out of Islam.
Precisely. And it's not just overt religious groups. University professors and even fellow students actively propagate atheistic ideas, often preying on young people's profound lack of religious knowledge, their inherent psychological fragility when away from home, or simply the sheer, overwhelming power of repetition. The consistent, relentless exposure to these ideas, coupled with a fundamental lack of foundational Islamic knowledge, makes many remarkably vulnerable to doubt and eventual rejection of their faith.
That's truly disheartening to consider the systematic nature of this. And what about societal pressure, especially on young women? How does that impact their modesty, their sense of self, and their adherence to Islamic dress?
The societal and cultural pressure, particularly on veiled young women, is immense, pervasive, and relentlessly unyielding. They face an overwhelming torrent of media inputs and advertising that relentlessly promote nudity, sexualization, and openly instill fear or aversion towards Islamic practices, including the hijab. We have seen countless situations where girls, even those who began their journey with strict adherence to the hijab, eventually remove it, sometimes, as I mentioned, even at the airport upon arrival, or adopt increasingly immodest clothing due to this relentless pressure and subtle, yet often overt, bullying. This isn't just a matter of personal choice. It's often a consequence of an environment designed to make modesty intolerable. Even devout students who valiantly try to maintain their modesty often experience profound loneliness, a deep sense of isolation, and immense internal struggles, as they are constantly at odds with the prevailing norms. This pressure isn't even limited to religious adherence. It extends to outright bullying and racism, affecting not only those who steadfastly adhere to their faith, but also those who desperately attempt to integrate, as their Arab, African, or Middle Eastern features are often sufficient grounds for discrimination, regardless of their level of assimilation or westernization. They are, in many ways, never truly accepted.
Right. Now, many families believe that education in these foreign institutions is always superior, a guaranteed path to academic excellence that will open all doors. But what is the reality within the academic setting itself, beyond the glossy brochures and international rankings? Is this belief truly well-founded?
This raises an absolutely important question, and it's a profound myth that we absolutely need to dispel. The idea of universally superior foreign education often conceals significant drawbacks, startling compromises, and hidden pitfalls. From what have been observed in countless scenarios, the actual academic standard in many European universities is simply not as high as widely perceived or advertised. Professors often exhibit a notable lack of genuine concern for student comprehension, frequently rushing through material, and much of the curriculum is often weak and condensed, lacking the rigor one might expect from a top-tier institution. Students are frequently required to exert extraordinary personal effort to research and find information not adequately covered in lectures or prescribed materials information which they are then tested on. This places an undue and unfair burden on them, leading to surface-level learning rather than deep understanding. What's even more concerning, and truly undermines the integrity of the system, is the pervasive corruption and bribery within these universities. We have seen instances where passing certain courses can be achieved simply by paying money, often to professors or administrators, leading to a profound lack of genuine learning and devaluing the entire credential.
So the degree itself might not even represent real knowledge.
Exactly. And there are even documented instances of academic theft and brazen plagiarism, not just among students, but also shockingly by faculty members themselves, where professors claim student work or publish research under their own names, undermining the very principles of academic honesty and integrity that higher education is supposed to uphold. This is not about excellence. It's often about expedience and corruption.
That paints a very different and quite alarming picture from what we're usually led to believe about these prestigious institutions. And beyond the classroom, are there mandatory activities that push students into compromising situations or expose them to environments that clash directly with their deeply held values?
Absolutely. This is where the subtle coercion often comes into play. Universities frequently mandate participation in various cultural events or activities under the guise of integration or learning about the host country's culture. These are not optional pleasantries. They can include attendance at religious holidays like Christmas or Easter, traditional events with deeply embedded religious roots, and even highly politicized events like LGBTQ+ parades.
Mandatory attendance.
Attendance at such events is often compulsory, yes, with academic or social penalties for non-participation. This exposes students to overtly haram environments explicitly forbidden in Islam, where professors and university staff are frequently observed to be intoxicated, openly consuming alcohol, or engaged in other illicit behaviors. Furthermore, mandatory mixed-gender sports classes are shockingly common, where immodest attire is strictly required. This forces Muslim girls, particularly, to make an agonizing choice: compromise their modesty, their religious principles, or face severe academic penalties, as some professors are completely unyielding and unsympathetic on this point. This is not about freedom or choice. It's about forced conformity, a subtle yet powerful indoctrination into a lifestyle that fundamentally clashes with their values.
And once they manage to graduate, assuming they get a legitimate degree, is the job market as open and welcoming as they might expect, or do they face further hurdles and deeply entrenched discrimination?
The unfortunate reality, one observed countless times, is that even highly qualified Arab and Muslim graduates face significant and systematic discrimination in the job market. Despite their credentials, despite their hard work, many struggle profoundly to secure meaningful employment. We have concrete, documented examples of companies explicitly demanding that veiled women remove their hijabs as a condition for employment, with some individuals tragically succumbing to this immense pressure simply to gain a livelihood.
That's just awful.
It constitutes a profound humiliation. These countries, while in genuine need of skilled labor and often actively recruiting from abroad, frequently demand submission to their values, a complete ideological capitulation as a prerequisite for employment. It's not just about skills, it's about conformity. Furthermore, there's often a hidden hostility, an underlying current of envy and even jealousy from local colleagues. This often actively prevents Arab and Muslim professionals from ascending to leadership positions, regardless of their superior performance, their work ethic, or their qualifications. They're simply not viewed as true peers or potential leaders within these hierarchical structures. They're often relegated to perpetual subordinate roles.
Moving beyond the academic and professional spheres then, let's turn our attention back to the overwhelming social environment outside the classroom. You've referred to it quite powerfully as an inescapable torrent of fitna. What does that truly mean in practice? Can you help our listeners truly grasp the scale and intensity of that challenge?
It is precisely that, a relentless, inescapable, and utterly overwhelming torrent of temptation and tribulation. The scale of moral corruption in these societies is, unequivocally, incomparable to anything seen or imagined in Muslim countries. You are immersed in a pervasive presence of explicit nudity in advertising and public spaces, the open and widespread public consumption of alcohol, public displays of affection that border on the explicit, and even overt acts of fornication and sodomy occurring without restraint in public spaces. It's not an occasional incident you might stumble upon, it's the default setting, the normalized background of daily public life. This makes the Islamic injunction of lowering one's gaze not merely difficult, but a practical impossibility when faced with such constant, unavoidable exposure to sites that are explicitly prohibited in Islam.
Just impossible to avoid.
It really is. The sheer volume and constant presence of these sites means your spiritual defenses are under perpetual assault, leading to an inevitable gradual desensitization and often, sadly, compromise.
And how does this hypersexualized, individualistic societal atmosphere, particularly the living arrangements like dorms, specifically impact young people who are trying to maintain their values? Are mixed-gender dorms a particularly significant factor in this moral erosion?
Oh, absolutely. The issue of mixed-gender university dormitories is widespread and deeply, profoundly problematic. Muslim and non-Muslim students of both genders often reside together, sharing communal spaces. In some extreme but not uncommon cases, due to limited space or administrative oversight, students might even be assigned rooms with individuals of the opposite sex.
Seriously, sharing a room.
It happens. The moral boundaries are not really blurred. They are entirely erased. You frequently hear disturbing and obscene sounds emanating from adjacent rooms in these dormitories, highlighting the complete lack of privacy, decency, and any sense of moral restraint. This is their immediate living environment, 24/7. Compounding this is the strong and overwhelming current of individualism prevalent in these societies. This cultural emphasis on individual autonomy above all else leads students, even siblings sent to study together, to quickly abandon mutual accountability, the sense of looking out for each other's spiritual well-being. It frequently results in a betrayal of trust and a swift unchecked descent into depravity, where the protective jealousy or gira, that innate Islamic sense of protective honor for one's family, especially female kin, diminishes entirely, leaving individuals profoundly vulnerable and unchecked in their actions.
It sounds like a deliberately engineered environment almost, a system that actively undermines religious and moral frameworks. Are there other, perhaps more subtle methods used to target and manipulate students, especially those who come from more conservative backgrounds?
Yes. The manipulation is deeply embedded, almost clinical in its approach. There's readily available access to contraceptives, including free distribution in some universities, normalizing casual sexual activity. You'll find the widespread sale of sexual products such as condoms and sex toys openly available in supermarkets and even street vending machines. This accessibility not only normalizes promiscuity, but removes any practical barrier to it. Furthermore, there are regular awareness campaigns and workshops that openly teach safe sex practices, effectively eradicating any sense of guilt or moral compunction associated with illicit sexual behavior by framing it as a normal, healthy, and even responsible part of life. What's truly insidious, and perhaps the most dangerous form of manipulation, is how university-appointed psychologists and social workers actively engage in manipulating religious students. They subtly coerce them to conform to the prevailing corrupt environment, sometimes even using students' personal vulnerabilities and emotional fragility against them, preying on their isolation and lack of social or religious support to push them towards accepting the common practices.
So the support systems might actually be working against them.
In some cases, yes. These are not neutral therapists. They are often agents of assimilation into the dominant culture, whether consciously or not.
Given everything you've described, the systematic nature of the moral erosion, the academic compromises, the societal pressures.
Yeah.
What are the tangible, real-world outcomes? What truly happens to these young people once they've been immersed in such environments? And what is the bitter harvest for them and their families?
The consequences are heartbreaking, profoundly tragic, and often irreversible. These observations come from countless real-life accounts, not just isolated incidents. Many students experience a profound total loss of religion, morals, soul, and life. It's not just a spiritual decline. It impacts their entire being, their essence. Many return without a legitimate degree, having resorted to bribery for certificates, or they become hopelessly addicted to gambling, alcohol, or drugs. It's also increasingly common to see them adopting tattoos, often meticulously hidden from their unsuspecting parents, and various body piercings, driven by the strong influence of the new society and its ephemeral trends. These are visible markers of an internal transformation, a permanent change from their origins.
And what is the ripple effect? What is the profound impact on their families back home and, on a broader scale, on their home countries that invested so much hope and money in them?
The ripple effect is devastating. The immense financial and emotional investment made by families often results in profound disappointment, a deep sense of betrayal. Children adopt the values of the host country, becoming spiritually dead and emotionally detached from their families, their traditions, and their faith. Some, shockingly, even abandon their parents in nursing homes, mirroring local customs, a truly tragic and unimaginable outcome for families who sacrificed everything to provide this perceived opportunity. On a broader societal scale, there's a devastating impact on Muslim countries, which lose their most competent, their most intelligent, and potentially their most righteous youth. This leads to a critical drain of talent, a brain drain, and a weakening of their own societies as they are deprived of their future leaders, innovators, and moral compasses. The human capital, the very future of these nations, is squandered.
This raises a very specific and important question that I'm sure many might ponder. What about the intention to go abroad for da'wah, to invite others to Islam? Is that a realistic or even advisable goal in these environments, given everything you've described?
This is a profoundly misguided notion, I have to say. It's a dangerous delusion that must be categorically challenged and unequivocally refuted. The idea that one can successfully go abroad for da'wah in these environments is often a fantasy, frankly. The overwhelming fitna, the torrent of temptation and moral degradation present in these societies makes it nearly impossible for individuals to even maintain their own piety, to safeguard their own faith, let alone influence others positively or invite them to Islam. We must state this with absolute conviction. Islam is inherently strong in its principles, but one's human nature, your human nature, without constant reinforcement and strong community support, is profoundly vulnerable when confronted with these overwhelming forces.
So you're saying the environment is just too strong?
It's systematically designed to corrupt, not to be a fertile ground for a sincere invitation to Islam. Many who go with this noble intention quickly find themselves struggling merely to hold on to their own faith, often losing it completely in the process. It is, in effect, a sacrifice of one's own soul for a mission that is, for most people, utterly unattainable.
These general descriptions are powerful, painting a comprehensive picture of the dangers. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, can you share some specific examples? Real-life accounts that illustrate these dangers in different regions of the world. Let's start with France, perhaps. It's often seen as a cultural and academic hub.
France, yes. The initial enchantment that many students feel upon arrival, the allure of Parisian streets and cafe culture, it quickly gives way to a shocking and often brutal reality. We have observed specific accounts of young women abandoning their hijab at the airport upon arrival, sometimes even before stepping foot outside.
Right at the airport.
Yes. Driven by a pervasive fear of discrimination and social ostracization. A fear that, while perhaps unexperienced directly yet, is instilled by the atmosphere. This immediate concession sets a devastating tone for their entire stay. There's also the swift adoption of non-halal food by many, often accompanied by disingenuous religious justifications they claim it's a necessity, due to difficulty finding halal options. rather than acknowledging the weakening of their resolve. This rapidly leads to an insidious erosion of fundamental religious practices like daily prayer and fasting during Ramadan, even among those previously considered average Muslims back home. In stark contrast to their home countries where social and familial oversight, communal accountability, and the presence of pious role models provide a protective net, the absence of such oversight in France often leads to complete ruin for many individuals. The tragic reality is that parents often remain completely oblivious to their children's true moral and spiritual state, as students exclusively report positive experiences, meticulously concealing the truth, fostering a false belief that their children are angels and thriving academically and morally.
So there's a disconnect between what parents think is happening and the reality.
A huge disconnect. It has been repeatedly observed that academic excellence, a gleaming degree, can often tragically coexist with a profoundly morally degraded personal life outside of studies. France's true agenda, it must be asserted with clarity, is that it does not want your children for free. It does not desire to uplift them for their own sake. Rather, it subtly seeks to humiliate and control them, to assimilate them into its secular and often anti-religious worldview. The concept of women's freedom in France, so often lauded, is, in our assessment based on observation, a great lie. Women there are often enslaved in a different way, due to a profound lack of legal and social protections in non-marital relationships, which deeply devalues marriage itself and leaves women incredibly vulnerable. For example, we know of a French Christian woman who endured severe physical abuse and homelessness with her partner due to legal entanglements and a complete lack of family support within that system. Another woman was unable to legally disentangle herself from a former partner's financial liabilities, despite him having abandoned her and their children. This reveals how the French system actively combats Islamic values, specifically targeting modesty, the sanctity of marriage, and traditional family structures, often through legal and social frameworks that undermine these concepts.
That's a very unsettling picture of France, certainly far from the romanticized image. What about Japan? A country often idealized for its cleanliness, order, technological advancement. Is there a hidden reality there too for Muslim students?
Japan, yes. While superficially impressing with its immaculate cleanliness, efficiency, and visible order, it often conceals what we have observed to be deep-seated spiritual and moral maladies beneath its polished surface. It's a society where a pervasive alcohol culture exists, particularly in professional settings, and participation in after-work drinking events is often implicitly or explicitly mandatory for career advancement and social integration.
Mandatory drinking.
Often, yes, to be part of the team, to get ahead. What's even darker is the pervasive reality of elderly exploitation. Companies actively defraud the elderly, purchasing their heirlooms and life savings at dirt-cheap prices, and openly celebrating these acts of theft and manipulation as clever business. Some elderly individuals, feeling profoundly abandoned and without hope, even resort to committing minor crimes just to gain entry into prison for basic care and human interaction, a tragic commentary on societal neglect. We've witnessed instances of academic theft where personal research, the fruit of a student's labor, is brazenly plagiarized by professors and published under their own names, a fundamental betrayal of academic integrity that goes unchecked. The phenomena of karoshi, death by overwork, and alarmingly high suicide rates, particularly among retirees who perceive their lives as utterly valueless outside of work, are stark indicators of the deep societal malaise, the spiritual emptiness at its core. There's also the tragic reality of lonely deaths, where individuals die in isolation in their apartments, unnoticed by anyone, sometimes for weeks, without anyone to notice or care for them.
That's horrifying.
It is. The societal emphasis on collectivism over individualism, often encapsulated by the saying, "the nail that sticks out gets hammered down," stifles personal expression, critical thinking, and any attempt at moral nonconformity. It's also notable that the general populace often exhibits superficial reading habits, predominantly consuming trivial content like manga, rather than material of substance, benefit, or spiritual depth. We've even encountered a shocking incident where a university professor brazenly encouraged a Muslim student to consume alcohol and mockingly suggested they could simply blame God for it later, an open act of spiritual sabotage. Furthermore, the historical glorification of figures like samurai and ninja as gods of murder highlights a deep cultural reverence for a violent and immoral past. Japan's brutal colonial history is often carefully whitewashed, but it's important to remember the massacres and widespread sexual exploitation of women, such as comfort women, in occupied Asian countries during World War II. This contrasts sharply with the sanitized historical narratives often presented. The historical and ongoing devaluation of women in Japanese society is glaringly evident. They are often expected to serve men, even in professional contexts, and their roles are rigidly defined. Finally, it has been observed that Muslim men who marry Japanese women often subtly but significantly compromise their Islamic identity, adopting Japanese customs and losing their religious distinctiveness, their unique Islamic character. The ultimate warning here is profound. You will lose your heart and soul, and the wealth of this world will not compensate you for that loss. No material gain, no prestigious job can replace what you will lose internally.
Let's turn to Sweden now, often viewed as a progressive, orderly society. What have your observations revealed about the experience of young Muslims there? Is it as welcoming as it seems?
Sweden presents a complex and ultimately perilous picture for young Muslims. Initially, there might be a perceived period of acceptance towards refugees and immigrants, but this eventually gives way to increasing racism and hostility against Muslims, particularly as their steadfastness in faith becomes evident and they resist complete assimilation. A deeply concerning aspect is how young children, astonishingly as young as 10 years old, are exposed to atheistic and evolutionary theories in schools from an early age, presented as undisputed facts, fundamentally contributing to a systematic weakening of their religious foundations.
At 10 years old?
Yes. This often leads to the tragic outcome where children forget the Quran, which they may have memorized, and abandon other religious practices due to the extreme scarcity of Islamic schooling and the painful absence of a supportive, vibrant Muslim community that can reinforce their faith. There's also the controversial and alarming authority of the Swedish state over children, including the potential for child abduction by social services for what are deemed culturally permissible reasons in Sweden, but are seen as violations of parental rights by Muslim families. This prompts many parents to avoid official institutions entirely, living in constant fear for their children's custody. Despite the outward appearance of cleanliness, order, and social welfare, Sweden is often portrayed by those who live there as a place where people feel like slaves to the system, experiencing a profound lack of true personal freedom despite the progressive rhetoric and pervasive sense of unhappiness, a quiet despair.
Slaves to the system.
That's the feeling many express. It's a striking observation that many Somalis and other Muslim communities who initially sought refuge there now express a strong, urgent desire to emigrate from Sweden due to the deteriorating religious and moral environment, realizing the profound cost. A crucial warning applies here. Be wary of deceptive portrayals by some refugees who exaggerate the positive aspects of life in Europe to entice others to follow, often leading them into difficult and regrettable circumstances, into environments that will ultimately compromise their faith and future generations.
Now, to Spain, are there specific legal and educational changes making the environment even more perilous for young Muslims, effectively targeting children from a very young age? What's happening there?
Spain has indeed seen deeply concerning and alarming developments, particularly with new laws, such as amendments to the Sexual and Reproductive Health and Voluntary Termination of Pregnancy Act, which are being discussed and implemented with widespread societal approval. A profoundly troubling aspect, one that should alarm every parent, is the mandatory affectionate and emotional sexual education introduced from preschool, starting at the tender ages of 3-4 years old, even before formal primary schooling begins.
Preschool. Sexual education.
Yes. 3 to 4 years old, this education is universally applied across all schools, public and private, and explicitly aims to promote human rights and equality, including the highly controversial LGBTQ+ agenda. Its core objective is to normalize all sexual choices and behaviors, fundamentally to remove any sense of guilt from engaging in illicit acts, eradicating the concept of sin from a child's mind from their earliest developmental stages. What is profoundly alarming, in a direct assault on parental rights, is the extreme exclusion of parents, who have no legal right whatsoever to object or withdraw their children from this curriculum. The state unequivocally asserts that their children will be taught this regardless of parental objections, making it compulsory indoctrination.
Parents have no say.
No legal right to opt out. This development is clearly framed as a deliberate, systematic agenda driven by powerful feminist movements, aiming to fundamentally transform the country and systematically dismantle traditional values, particularly those rooted in religious morality. The pervasive fitna in public spaces is so widespread that it strikingly resembles pornography, with even young children constantly exposed to explicit content on billboards, in media, and in public behavior. Tragically, many parents in Spain remain completely unaware of these specific laws and the truly objectionable content their children are being taught in schools, leading to a profound, almost irreconcilable generational gap in values and an unacknowledged moral crisis.
Finally, let's discuss Russia and Ukraine. What is the lived experience of students there, particularly concerning morality and the academic environment? The observations you've shared from these regions are quite stark.
What has been observed in Russia and Ukraine is deeply, disturbingly consistent. We have noted with alarming certainty that everyone commits zina, fornication, except for those whom Allah has mercy upon. This is described as the primary and most pervasive problem, occurring from day one of a student's arrival, even within university dormitories. The living conditions in mixed dorms and facilities are truly hazardous to one's morality, with shared bathrooms and living spaces making nudity common and disturbing and obscene sounds frequently heard emanating from adjacent rooms, stripping away any semblance of privacy or moral boundary. There's also a relentless compulsion to participate in immoral activities, such as mandatory mixed-gender sports classes where immodest attire is strictly enforced, and compulsory attendance at non-Islamic celebrations where public intoxication is rampant and expected. What's crucial to understand is that the primary targets of this pervasive corruption are precisely the chaste and righteous Muslim youth, those who come with good intentions and moral uprightness. They are systematically lured and corrupted rather than those who are already engaged in illicit behavior.
They target the good ones.
Precisely. The rapid moral decline is striking and heart-wrenching, with students swiftly descending from observing religious practices to engaging in forbidden activities, often within a matter of months or even mere weeks, leading to a profound hybridization of their identity, where their Islamic self is almost entirely subsumed by the new environment. The severe long-term consequences are horrifying, including students returning as addicts, addicted to gambling, alcohol, or drugs. Some have even committed violent crimes. We have a documented case of a medical student who brutally murdered his father under the influence of drugs after returning. Many, tragically, contract sexually transmitted diseases. Academic corruption is equally widespread, including rampant bribery for grades and administrative manipulation of academic outcomes, where professors are sometimes forced to pass undeserving students. It's also important to note that many degrees from these countries are practically unrecognized in Western Europe, forcing graduates to undergo further costly qualifications in their home countries, often after having lost their religious commitment entirely. Pervasive tactics of entrapment and blackmail are employed, where students, particularly girls, are enticed into illicit sexual acts, often secretly filmed or photographed, leading to severe emotional distress, coercion, and lifelong trauma.
Blackmail. That's terrifying.
It is. The deceptive illusion of strengthening faith, due to initial exposure to fitna, the idea that a little exposure will build resilience, is a dangerous, temporary phase before the overwhelming environment inevitably leads to moral compromise and spiritual collapse. The idea that sending a brother with a sister provides protection is often tragically refuted by experience, as the brother himself frequently succumbs to the corrupt environment, losing his protective jealousy, gira, and becoming part of the problem. It's simply impossible to avoid fitna due to its widespread presence in all public and private spaces. It is unavoidable. A striking observation is how Western powers have instrumentalized morality, conditioning financial aid to Ukraine and allowing LGBTQ+ parades, demonstrating the pervasive ideological push. Christian groups, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, actively proselytize, targeting students in their dorms with religious materials, often strategically in Arabic. We've heard heartbreaking examples of Muslim girls who resorted to prostitution to make ends meet, or engaged in zina and then desperately sought abortions or hymen repair procedures to hide their actions, or became victims of profound betrayal and blackmail. The stories are truly endless, and each one a tragedy.
This has been a deeply unsettling and frankly sobering discussion, revealing dangers that are far greater and more systematic than most could ever imagine. As we bring this deep dive to a sharp conclusion, what is the ultimate takeaway? What is the single, most crucial message you want our listeners to absorb from all these profound observations and realities?
The profound cost, the ultimate price of this path, is something that truly cannot be overstated. Sending your children to study in these environments is nothing short of a gamble with their very souls and their eternal lives. This cost, the spiritual and moral devastation, far, far outweighs any perceived worldly gain, be it a prestigious degree, a boost in social status, or even a fleeting financial opportunity. You are risking everything that truly matters.
So what does this all mean for families who are currently grappling with these monumental decisions, standing at this crossroads? What fundamental priorities should they be challenging in their own minds and hearts?
This raises an absolutely critical question that every parent must confront head-on. Is social status, is a prestigious degree, or is perceived financial opportunity truly, unequivocally, worth losing one's faith, one's honor, one's profound family connections, and ultimately one's eternal salvation? You must ask yourselves, is the trade-off of spiritual ruin for fleeting worldly gains truly acceptable? The answer, when faced with the stark reality, must be a resounding no.
And your final unyielding admonition to our listeners, stripped of any sugarcoating, what do you need them to hear?
My stern admonition is direct. It is urgent and is unequivocally clear. Do not send your children to these lands for study. This is not merely advice or a suggestion. It is a dire warning against what amounts to an act of self-harm, a profound and unforgivable betrayal of sacred trust towards your children and their spiritual well-being. Many who have gone through this devastating experience themselves and who have observed the profound, irreversible impact on countless others lament with the deepest regret that they were not given this clear, this strong, this unyielding warning before it was too late.
To leave our listeners with a final provocative thought, something that truly captures the essence of this profound and almost unimaginable danger, what analogy best illustrates the immense risk involved in sending a child into such an environment?
Imagine, if you will, throwing your beloved child into a raging inferno, into a literal blazing fire, and then with profound naivety telling them, "Do not burn." End quote. That is precisely, absolutely what you are doing, what you are condemning your children to when you send them into these environments for study. This analogy should leave you with a deeply unsettling realization, prompting profound self-reflection and a complete, immediate reevaluation of your priorities and decisions regarding your children's future before their souls are consumed by the flames.